The transport ship moved through space toward the frozen moon. Inside, 20 recruits sat in silence. They came from different worlds across the galaxy. Some had scales, some had fur, others had skin that glowed in the dark. But they all wanted the same thing, to join the Galactic Coalition military. Day sat near the window and looked outside. The moon below was white and gray. Ice covered everything. He could see no trees, no buildings, nothing alive. Just endless ice and rock. The human recruit took a slow breath. He had seen cold before. The mountains back home on Earth got very cold in winter. His grandfather had taught him how to survive there. Commander Velthar walked into the room. The commander was tall, maybe 3 meters high. His body looked like it was made of blue crystal. Light moved through him when he walked. He stopped at the front of the room and looked at all the recruits. "Listen carefully," Velthar said. His voice was deep and cold. "Below us is testing ground Epsilon 7. You will spend 72 hours there, 3 days and 3 nights. The temperature drops to -60 degrees at night. You have basic supplies, a thermal blanket, some heat packs, food and water for 3 days. That is all." A recruit in the front row raised one of her 4 arms. She was Yuna from a world called Velkar. Her skin was smooth and purple. "Commander, what about shelter?" "No shelter," Velthar answered. "You build it or you freeze. That is the test." Another recruit spoke up. This one was Quan, a huge creature with 8 legs and a body covered in thick armor plates. He came from a desert world where it never rained. "We can dig into the ice." "Yes, you can try anything," the commander said. "But remember this. Evolution made you for your home world. Some of you will find this moon easy. Others will find it impossible. The test shows us who can adapt and who cannot." Day listened, but said nothing. He touched the small rod in his pocket. It was made of ferrocerium, a metal that made sparks when you scraped it. His grandfather had given it to him years ago. "Take this," the old man had said. "Technology can fail, but fire never changes." The shuttle separated from the main ship. It carried all 20 recruits down to the surface. As they descended, Day looked at the others. Most of them came from warm worlds. He could see worry in their eyes. Some were already shaking and they had not even landed yet. The shuttle touched down on the ice. The door opened. Cold air rushed in like a wave. It hit Day's face and made his eyes water, but he had felt worse. The mountains at home could be just as cold. "Move out!" Velthar shouted. "Your 72 hours begin now." The recruits jumped out onto the ice. The shuttle lifted off immediately, leaving them alone. Day looked around. The landscape was flat and white in all directions. Wind blew across the ice, making strange whistling sounds. In the distance, he could see some rock formations rising from the frozen ground. Some recruits immediately opened their heat packs. These were small chemical devices that made warmth. Each recruit had 5 packs. They would last about 6 hours each. Day did some math in his head. 5 packs times 6 hours was 30 hours of heat, but the test was 72 hours long. The math did not work. "Everyone, gather together," Yuna called out. "We should share body heat." Several recruits moved close to each other. They wrapped their thermal blankets around the group. Day watched but did not join them. He walked away toward the rock formations instead. "Hey, human!" Quan called after him. "Where are you going? Safety is in numbers." Day turned and looked back. "I need to find something," he said simply. Then he kept walking. The rocks were about half a kilometer away. Day walked steadily, his boots crunching on the ice. He had worn good thermal clothing under his uniform. Not the best, but good enough. His hands were cold, but not frozen. His face hurt from the wind, but he could handle it. When he reached the rocks, he began searching. He looked at the dark stone carefully. There, in the cracks and shadows, he found what he needed. Lichen. It was a plant-like organism that grew even in extreme cold. It was dry and brittle, perfect for starting fire. He pulled out his knife and carefully scraped the lichen into a small bag. Then he looked for more materials. He found some dried moss in the protected areas behind the rocks. He found dead plant material blown against the stone by the wind. He collected it all. The sun was starting to set. The temperature was dropping fast. Day could see his breath turning to ice crystals in the air. He needed to work quickly now. He found a spot between two large rocks. The rocks blocked the wind from two sides. He used his knife to dig into the ice, making a small pit. Around the pit, he placed more stones. These would hold heat once he got his fire started. From his pack, he pulled out his emergency shelter material. It was a thin, flexible sheet meant to be used as a tent. Instead, he cut a small piece from it. The material was synthetic and would burn well. Day arranged his materials carefully. At the bottom, the finest lichen fibers. On top of that, the piece of shelter material. Then more lichen, slightly larger pieces. Then the moss. He built it like a small nest. He took out the ferro rod and his knife. The rod was about 10 centimeters long and 1 centimeter thick. He held it over the tinder bundle. The first strike sent sparks flying. They were bright orange in the growing darkness. Some landed on the lichen, but nothing caught. Day struck again. More sparks. Again and again. On the fifth strike, a spark landed on the shelter material. It glowed. Then it caught fire. A tiny flame, smaller than his fingernail, began to grow. Day quickly leaned down and blew on it gently. The flame spread to the lichen, then to the moss. Smoke rose up into the cold air. The fire grew stronger. He carefully added more fuel, more moss, small pieces of dried plant material. The fire grew bigger. Orange light danced across the rocks. Heat, blessed heat, began to warm his hands. In the distance, he could hear the other recruits. Some were crying out. Others were calling for emergency extraction. The cold was defeating them already, and the first night had not even fully arrived yet. Day fed his fire and smiled. His ancestors had survived ice ages with this knowledge. They had crossed frozen continents with nothing but fire and determination. He was not worried about 72 hours. The human sat down next to his fire and began to warm his food. The test had just begun, but he already knew he would pass. Above, in the monitoring station, Commander Velthar stared at his screen. One of the thermal readings was wrong. It showed an open flame on the surface. That should not be possible. He leaned forward, his crystal body flickering with confusion. "What is the human doing?" he asked. Nobody had an answer. The first night on the frozen moon was brutal. The temperature dropped below -60 degrees. Wind screamed across the ice plains, cutting through everything. Above the moon, in the warm monitoring station, Commander Velthar and his staff watched the recruits through their sensors. Yuna was the first to fail. She huddled inside her thermal blanket with 3 other recruits. They had opened all their heat packs, desperate for warmth. But Yuna's species, the Velkari, came from a world where the coldest temperature was about 15 degrees. Her body had never known real cold. Her purple skin began to change color. It turned darker, almost black at the edges. Ice crystals formed on her arms and face. She tried to speak, but her mouth would not move properly. Her breathing became shallow and slow. "Something is wrong with Yuna," one of the other recruits said. He shook her gently. "Yuna, can you hear me?" She did not respond. Her eyes were open but empty. The medical sensor on her suit detected the problem. Her core body temperature had dropped too low. The suit automatically activated her emergency beacon. A rescue shuttle dropped from the monitoring station. It landed near the group, and medical personnel rushed out. They wrapped Yuna in heated blankets and carried her inside. The shuttle lifted off quickly, disappearing into the dark sky. Velthar made a note on his datapad. First extraction. 6 hours into the trial. Velkari biology incompatible with extreme cold. 4 hours later, Quan was in trouble. The big alien with 8 legs had decided to dig into the ice. He thought he could create a shelter underground where the temperature might be warmer. His powerful legs broke through the surface ice easily. But Quan came from a desert world. His people had evolved to survive in heat, not cold. They had thick armor plates to protect them from the sun, but armor made of natural materials conducted heat very efficiently. In the desert, this helped cool them down. On the frozen moon, it had the opposite effect. The cold metal of his suit touched his armor plates. The armor plates touched his skin. The heat was sucked out of his body. He dug deeper, thinking movement would keep him warm, but the harder he worked, the more heat he lost. His movements became slower. One leg stopped responding, then another, then a third. Quan tried to climb out of the hole he had dug, but he could not move. His 8 legs were locked in place, frozen in position. His emergency beacon activated automatically. Another shuttle came down. The rescue team had to cut through the ice around him to pull him out. They loaded his frozen body onto the shuttle and took him away. Second extraction, Velthar said. 10 hours. Thros biology unsuitable for cold environment. By hour 18, 12 of the 20 recruits had been evacuated. Some had hypothermia. Others had severe frostbite. One had simply panicked and activated his beacon voluntarily, unable to face another hour in the cold. The 8 remaining recruits were in bad shape. They had burned through most of their heat packs. Their thermal blankets were coated in ice from their own frozen breath. They lay on the ground, barely moving, trying to conserve energy and warmth. But one recruit was different. Day sat comfortably beside his fire, which burned steadily between the rocks. He had spent the night feeding it carefully, adding fuel every hour. The fire had kept him warm, more than warm. He had actually been comfortable. When the sun rose on the first morning, Day stood and stretched. He had slept well, waking only to tend the fire. Now he looked around at his camp. The fire had melted some of the ice around it, creating a small pool of water. He took out his metal cup and filled it with the water, then held it over the flames. In a few minutes, the water was boiling. He dropped one of his food rations into it. The ration was designed to be eaten cold, but warming it made it taste much better. He ate his breakfast slowly, enjoying the hot meal. In the monitoring station, an analyst named Hana watched Day's thermal signature. She was human, too, part of the science team. She smiled as she watched him work. "Commander," she said, "you should see this." Velthar moved to her station. On the screen, they could see Day through the thermal imaging. The fire showed up as a bright orange-red spot. Around it, the ice was actually melting. "What is that energy source?" Velthar asked. "Did he bring an illegal heating device?" "No, sir," Hana replied. "That is combustion, an open flame. He is burning organic material to create heat." The commander's crystal body flickered through several colors. "Combustion? That is ancient, primitive. We stopped using open flames thousands of years ago. They are dangerous and inefficient." "Yes, sir," Hana agreed. "But they work, and they work without any advanced technology. You only need fuel and a way to start the fire." Velthar stared at the screen. "But where did he learn this?" "From his ancestors, I imagine," Hana said. "Humans have been using fire for over 1,000,000 years. Long before we had electricity or fusion reactors or any modern technology, fire kept us alive through ice ages and frozen winters." After breakfast, Day began to explore the area around his camp. He always kept the fire visible, using it as a reference point. He found more lichen growing on the rocks. He found dead vegetation trapped in ice, which he carefully extracted. He gathered everything that could burn. He also found something interesting: a large, flat rock that had been heated by his fire during the night. The rock was still slightly warm. Day smiled. He could use this. He placed several of these rocks around his fire pit. They would absorb heat during the day and release it slowly at night. At midday, he saw one of the other recruits crawling toward him. It was a female with green scales and large eyes. She was from a world with warm oceans. She had no name Day could pronounce. "Please," she said weakly, "help me." Day looked at her, then at the fire. He made a decision. "Come, sit by the fire. Warm yourself." She crawled close to the flames and held out her hands. "What is this?" she asked. "This burning thing?" "It is called fire," Day explained. "It is controlled combustion. I feed it materials that burn and it produces heat." "I have never seen this," she said. "On my world, we use thermal regulators." "Those do not work here," Day said, "but fire always works. As long as you have fuel, you have heat." The scaled recruit warmed herself for an hour. Then she made a choice. She activated her emergency beacon. "I cannot do this," she said. "I cannot stay here for 2 more days. But thank you for the warmth, human." When the shuttle took her away, Day was alone again. He did not mind. He returned to his camp and continued improving it. He arranged rocks to create walls that blocked the wind. He positioned his thermal blanket behind the fire so that heat reflected back toward his sleeping area. He created a small storage area for his fuel, keeping it dry and organized. By the end of the second day, 19 recruits had been evacuated. Only Day remained. Commander Velthar watched the human sitting by his fire, eating warmed rations, looking completely relaxed. "This should not be possible," Velthar said. "He is from a temperate region of Earth, not the frozen poles. He should be struggling like the others." Hana shook her head. "Commander, I think you misunderstand humans. We do not adapt by changing our bodies. We adapt by changing our environment. We take hostile places and make them livable. That is what fire does. It transforms cold into warmth." Velthar was silent for a long time. Then he said, "One recruit remains. The human. Let us see if he can last the full 72 hours." Day fed his fire and smiled at the stars above. He knew he would last. This was not even difficult. His grandfather would have been proud. The second night was colder than the first. Wind howled across the frozen moon, carrying ice particles that stung like tiny knives. But inside his shelter of rocks, Day sat comfortably by his fire. The flames danced and crackled, creating a small bubble of warmth in the frozen wasteland. He had learned the rhythm of fire tending from his grandfather. Every 2 hours he woke and added more fuel. It was automatic now, like breathing. He did not even need to think about it. His body knew when the fire needed attention. During one of these wakings, he looked up at the sky. The monitoring station was visible as a bright point of light orbiting above. He wondered what the commander and his staff were thinking. They probably had never seen fire used this way. To them, it was ancient history. Today, it was survival. When the sun rose on the second day, Day decided to explore farther from his camp. He had enough fuel stored for several days. The fire could survive a few hours without him. He wanted to see more of this frozen moon. He walked across the ice plains, studying everything. The way the wind carved patterns into the snow. The way ice formed in layers, showing years of accumulation. The way light reflected off the frozen surface. Everything told him something about this place. After an hour of walking, he found something interesting. A small valley between ice ridges. The valley was protected from the wind. Even more interesting, there were patches of dark material visible through the ice. Some kind of plant life, frozen but preserved. Day used his knife to chip through the ice. He pulled out handfuls of the dark vegetation. It was brittle and dry, perfect for burning. There was enough here to keep his fire going for a week. He filled his pack and marked the location in his mind. On his way back to camp, he found another useful thing, a large piece of ice that was clear like glass. He carefully broke off a section and carried it back. This ice could be used as a lens to focus sunlight. If his ferro rod ever failed, he could start fire with sunlight instead. Always have a backup plan. That was another lesson from his grandfather. Back at camp, Day arranged his new fuel supply. He organized it by type and dryness. The driest material would burn fastest, good for starting fires. The slightly damp material would burn slower, good for keeping fires going through the night. Organization was important. It made survival easier. He spent the afternoon improving his camp even more. He built a small wall of ice blocks around his sleeping area. The wall blocked the wind and reflected heat from the fire. He created a rack using sticks and wire from his pack. He could use this to dry his clothes or warm his food. As evening approached, Day did something that surprised the monitoring station. He took off his boots and socks. He hung them on his drying rack near the fire. Then he took off his outer jacket and hung that up too. "Is he insane?" one of the analysts asked. "The temperature is dropping and he is removing his clothing?" Hana smiled. "No, he is drying them. Wet clothing loses its insulation. By drying everything by the fire, he makes sure his gear stays effective. Also, being near the fire, he does not need all those layers right now." Velthar watched carefully. The human sat near the flames in just his base layer clothing, completely relaxed. His feet were bare. He should be freezing, but the thermal sensors showed he was perfectly comfortable. Day ate his evening meal slowly. He had warmed his ration in water again, creating a kind of soup. He had also heated rocks in the fire and placed them around his sitting area. They radiated warmth like small heaters. After eating, he did something unexpected. He began to sing. It was an old song his grandfather had taught him. A mountain song about winter and survival and the strength of those who endure. His voice carried across the ice, the only human sound on this frozen world. In the monitoring station, Hana listened with tears in her eyes. She knew that song. Her grandmother had sung it too. "What is he doing now?" Velthar asked. "He is singing," Hana said. "It is something humans do. Music helps us stay calm. It reminds us that we are alive and thinking and feeling. Even in the worst conditions, we sing." The commander was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your species is very strange." "Yes," Hana agreed. "But our strangeness keeps us alive." That night, Day slept deeply. His fire burned steadily. His dried clothes were warm. His belly was full of hot food. Around him, the temperature dropped to -70 degrees. The coldest night of the trial. But inside his rock shelter, warmed by fire, Day was comfortable. The third day began with strong winds. Ice particles filled the air like fog. Visibility dropped to almost nothing. This was dangerous weather. If Day got lost away from his camp, he might not find his way back, so he stayed close to his fire. He spent the day making improvements to his shelter. He packed snow and ice into the gaps between rocks, making walls that blocked even more wind. He created a small roof using his emergency blanket and some rocks. Now he had a real shelter, not just a windbreak. He also did something clever with his water supply. He filled his water bottles and placed them near the fire, but not too close. The water warmed up, but did not boil. Warm water inside his body would help him stay warm from the inside out. Hot drinks were important in cold weather. By midday, the wind had died down. Day ventured out to gather more fuel. He found the valley again and collected more of the dark vegetation. He also found some interesting rocks that had layers of frozen material between them. He took samples. He was curious about what could grow on this frozen moon. On his way back, he saw something moving in the distance. At first, he thought it was another recruit. But then he realized it was just ice and wind creating shadows. He was truly alone now. All the others had given up. Only he remained. This did not bother him. Day had spent many days alone in the mountains back home. Solitude was not scary, it was peaceful. It gave him time to think and observe and learn. That evening, he sat by his fire and looked at his hands. They were rough and calloused from work, but they were not frostbitten. His face was red from wind, but not frozen. His feet were tired, but not damaged. He was doing well. He thought about the other recruits. They had failed not because they were weak, but because they did not have the right knowledge. They came from worlds where survival meant using technology. When that technology failed, they had nothing else. But humans were different. Humans had survived without technology for most of their existence. They had crossed continents on foot. They had hunted in frozen tundra. They had lived in deserts and jungles and mountains. They had learned to make fire and tools and shelter from almost nothing. This knowledge was passed down through generations, grandfather to father, father to son. It was in Day's blood and bones. It was part of being human. He fed his fire and prepared for the final night. Just 12 more hours, and the trial would be complete. He had used almost none of his technological supplies. His heat packs were unopened. His thermal blanket was almost new. He had survived using only ancient knowledge and a handful of gathered materials. In the monitoring station, Commander Velthar reviewed the data. One recruit had succeeded where 19 had failed. And that recruit was from a species that had no natural adaptations for cold, no thick fur, no insulating blubber, no antifreeze in their blood. "Explain this," Velthar said to Hana. "How is this possible?" Hana looked at the screen showing Day by his fire. "Commander, you designed this test to show that biology determines survival, but humans proved something different. We showed that knowledge and adaptability can beat biology. We do not need to evolve thick fur. We make fire. We do not need natural armor. We make clothes and shelter. We take our environment and we change it to suit our needs." Velthar's crystal body flickered with many colors. He was thinking deeply. "This changes everything," he said finally. "If humans can do this with primitive technology, what can they do with advanced technology?" "I think you are beginning to understand," Hana said, "why Earth sent us to join the coalition." Outside on the frozen moon, Day smiled at the stars and fed his fire. Tomorrow, he would go home. Tonight he was warm. The final morning of the trial arrived with clear skies. Day woke before dawn and fed his fire one last time. The flames grew strong, pushing back the darkness. He sat close to the warmth and watched the sun rise over the frozen horizon. 72 hours, 3 days and 3 nights. The trial was almost over. Day had not activated his emergency beacon once. He had not called for help. He had not even come close to needing rescue. In fact, he felt better now than when he had started. He prepared his last breakfast on the frozen moon. He boiled water and made hot soup from his rations. He warmed his hands over the flames and thought about everything he had learned. This moon was harsh, but it was not impossible. With the right knowledge, even the coldest place could be survived. In the monitoring station, Commander Velthar and his staff prepared for the final pickup. The shuttle was ready to launch. They would collect Day in just a few hours. But first, Velthar wanted to understand what he had witnessed. "Play back the entire trial," he ordered. "I want to see everything the human did." The screen showed 3 days of footage compressed into 1 hour. They watched Day arrive on the ice. They watched him walk away from the other recruits. They watched him collect materials and build his fire. They watched him improve his shelter day by day. But what struck Velthar most was how calm the human looked. The other recruits had shown fear, panic, and desperation. Day showed none of these things. He moved with purpose and confidence. He never rushed, he never panicked. He just worked steadily, solving each problem as it appeared. "He was never in danger," Velthar said slowly. Not once. He knew he would survive from the very beginning. Yes, Hana confirmed. He had knowledge that the others lacked, and knowledge, Commander, is more powerful than any natural adaptation. Velthar turned to look at her. Your species came from one planet, one single world, yet you speak as if you can survive anywhere. We can, Hana said simply. Give a human some basic materials and time to learn, and they will find a way to survive almost anywhere. Cold worlds, hot worlds, wet worlds, dry worlds, we adapt. That is what we do. On the surface, Day began packing up his camp. He carefully put out his fire, making sure no embers remained. He scattered the ashes and moved the rocks back to their original positions. He believed in leaving no trace. The moon had been here long before him and would be here long after. He should not mark it unnecessarily. He did keep one thing, a small piece of the dark vegetation he had found. He put it in a sample bag. Maybe the scientists would find it interesting. Maybe it could teach them something about life in extreme cold. As he waited for the shuttle, he thought about the other recruits. He hoped they were okay. Hypothermia could be treated, but it was still dangerous. He wondered if they would try the trial again, or if this failure would end their military careers. He also thought about what would happen next. He had passed the trial, but that was just the beginning. There would be more tests, more training, more challenges. The coalition military would push him hard, but he was ready. His grandfather had taught him to be ready for anything. The shuttle appeared in the sky, growing larger as it descended. It landed softly on the ice near his camp. The door opened and Commander Velthar stepped out. The commander had never come down to collect a recruit personally before. Recruit Day, Velthar said formally. The trial is complete. You are the only one who did not require emergency extraction. Yes, sir, Day replied. He picked up his pack and walked toward the shuttle. Wait, Velthar said. I have questions. Your fire. Where did you learn to make it? Day stopped and turned. From my grandfather, sir. He taught me survival skills when I was young. Fire making, shelter building, finding water. Old knowledge from before humans had advanced technology. And you still learn these primitive skills, even though your people have fusion reactors and thermal regulators? Yes, sir, because technology can fail. Batteries run out. Equipment breaks, but knowledge never fails. If you know how to make fire, you can survive almost anywhere. Velthar was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, Can others of your species do this? Make fire? Most humans know the basic idea, Day said. Not all practice it, but many learn survival skills. We teach them to our children. We pass the knowledge down through generations. Why? Velthar asked. If you have technology, why keep the old knowledge? Day smiled. Because we remember what it was like without technology. We remember the ice ages when our ancestors huddled around fires to survive. We remember crossing frozen lands with nothing but fire and determination. That history is part of us. We do not forget it just because we now have better tools. Velthar's crystal body flickered through several colors. Come. Board the shuttle. We have much to discuss. Inside the shuttle, Hana was waiting. She smiled when she saw Day. Well done, she said in their shared human language. You made us look good. Day grinned. I just did what grandfather taught me. Nothing special. It was special to them, Hana said, nodding toward Velthar. They have never seen someone survive extreme cold without biological adaptations or advanced technology. As the shuttle lifted off, Day looked down at his campsite. The rocks were still there. The fire pit was visible as a black mark on the white ice, but soon snow would cover it. The wind would erase all traces. The moon would return to its frozen silence. They docked with the monitoring station. Velthar led Day to a conference room where several high-ranking officers waited. They were different species from different worlds, all decorated military leaders. Sit, Velthar instructed. Day sat. An officer with 4 arms and silver skin spoke first. Recruit Day, your performance was extraordinary, but we need to understand, was this luck? Or can any human do what you did? Not luck, sir, Day answered. Any human with basic survival training could have done the same. Some might have done it better. My grandfather, for example, could have been much more comfortable than I was. Another officer, this one covered in thick fur, leaned forward. Are you saying that your species actively trains for survival without technology? Many of us do, sir. Not everyone, but many. We have wilderness schools, survival courses. Military training includes these skills. We believe in being prepared for any situation. The officers looked at each other. They were clearly amazed by this information. Velthar spoke up. We designed this trial to test biological adaptation. We assumed that only species from cold worlds could pass. But you have shown us something different. You have shown us that knowledge can replace adaptation. Not replace, sir, Day corrected respectfully. Supplement. Biological adaptation is still valuable, but knowledge makes us flexible. A species adapted for cold cannot easily survive heat, but a species with knowledge can learn to survive both. An officer with scales and no legs spoke in a hissing voice. Then humans can survive in many environments? Yes, sir. On Earth, we live everywhere. Frozen polar regions, hot deserts, wet rainforests, dry mountains. Even underground and underwater, we adapt not by changing our bodies, but by changing our approach. The room was silent. These officers had spent their lives believing that biology was destiny, that your home world determined what environments you could survive. But here was proof that knowledge could overcome biology. Finally, Velthar stood. Recruit Day, you have passed the trial with the highest marks ever recorded. More than that, you have taught us an important lesson. The Coalition's training protocols will be updated based on what we learned from you. Sir? Day was surprised. Fire-making and primitive survival skills will now be part of standard training for all Coalition recruits, Velthar explained. If technology fails, our soldiers need backup methods. Your species has maintained this knowledge. Now we will learn it too. Day stood and saluted. I would be honored to teach, sir. You will, Velthar said. But first you need to complete your own training. Dismissed, recruit. As Day left the conference room, Hana caught up with him in the corridor. You just changed Coalition military doctrine, she said, impressed. Do you realize that? Day shrugged. I just made a fire, Hana. Grandfather would say it was nothing special. Maybe, Hana said, but to them, it was revolutionary. Come on, let me buy you a hot meal. A real one, not a ration packet. They walked down the corridor together, 2 humans far from home, carrying ancient knowledge into a future among the stars. 3 months passed after the trial on the frozen moon. The Coalition military training facility was busier than ever, but something had changed. In the large training yard, 200 recruits from 40 different species sat in a circle around a demonstration area. Day stood in the center. He wore his instructor uniform now, no longer just a recruit. Beside him was a pile of materials: rocks, dried plant matter, wood pieces, and other natural items. In his hand, he held a ferro rod. Fire is the oldest technology, Day began. His voice carried across the yard. Before we had fusion reactors, before we had electricity, before we even had metal tools, humans had fire. For more than 1 million years, we have used it. It kept us warm. It cooked our food. It protected us from predators. It allowed us to survive in places that should have killed us. The recruits watched carefully. Some were interested. Some were skeptical. One recruit, a being made of living rock from a volcanic world, raised a hand. Instructor, why do we need this? We have thermal regulators and heat packs. Why learn primitive methods? Day smiled. Good question. Let me answer with another question. What happens when your thermal regulator breaks, or when your heat packs run out, or when you are on a world where technology does not work properly? The rock being had no answer. Technology is wonderful, Day continued, but technology can fail. Knowledge does not fail. If you know how to make fire, you always have a backup plan. The soldier who depends only on technology is vulnerable. The soldier who has multiple options is strong. He knelt down and began arranging his materials. Watch carefully. I will show you how to build a fire from nothing. Over the next hour, Day demonstrated firemaking. He showed them how to prepare tinder, how to strike the ferro rod, how to blow on the ember gently. He showed them how to arrange fuel for maximum heat. He showed them how to maintain a fire in wind and rain. Many of the recruits tried and failed on their first attempts. Their strikes were too weak or too strong. They blew too hard on the embers. They arranged their fuel wrong. But Day was patient. He moved from recruit to recruit, correcting mistakes and offering encouragement. Fire does not care about your species or your homeworld, he told them. Fire follows simple rules. If you learn the rules, you can make fire anywhere there is oxygen and fuel. By the end of the day, 30 recruits had successfully made small fires. The others would try again tomorrow. Day collected the ferro rods and dismissed the class. As the recruits left, Commander Velthar approached. The crystal being had been watching from a distance. They are learning, Velthar observed. Yes, sir. Slowly. But they are learning. Some of them come from worlds where fire is impossible, worlds with different atmospheres, worlds where combustion cannot occur, yet they still practice. Day nodded. Understanding the principle is still valuable, sir. Even if they cannot make fire on their home world, they might need it somewhere else. Coalition soldiers go to many different planets. Velthar was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I have a report to show you. They walked to his office. On the screen was a document marked Incident Report, Rescue Mission Epsilon 12. Read it, Velthar said. Day read quickly. 2 weeks ago, a Coalition patrol ship had crashed on a cold moon, similar to the training ground, but even colder. The crew had survived the crash, but their ship's power was dead. No heat. No communications. They had emergency supplies, but those would only last a few days. The report continued. Crew member Yuna, previously evacuated from survival trial, remembered techniques demonstrated by human instructor, used emergency equipment to create friction fire, maintained warmth for 7 days until rescue arrived. All crew survived. Day looked up, surprised. Yuna? The Velkari recruit from my trial? Yes, she failed the original test, but after recovery, she attended your fire-making classes. She was one of your best students. When her ship crashed, she saved her entire crew using what you taught her. Day felt emotion rise in his chest. I am glad they survived. She sent a message, Velthar said. He played an audio file. Yuna's voice came through. Instructor Day, this is Yuna. I wanted to thank you. When I failed the Frozen Moon trial, I thought I was weak. But you taught me that strength is not just about biology. It is about knowledge and adaptation. The fire you taught me to make saved 6 lives. I will never forget this lesson. Thank you. Day was silent. He had not expected this. Velthar turned off the recording. Your knowledge has already saved lives, and it will save more. The Coalition is grateful. That evening, Day sat in his quarters and wrote a letter. He wrote it by hand on real paper the old way. It was addressed to his grandfather back on Earth. Grandfather, he wrote, I am writing to tell you that your teachings have reached the stars. The fire-making skills you taught me as a child have been shared with 40 different species across the galaxy. Today, I learned that these skills saved 6 lives on a frozen moon far from home. Your knowledge, passed down through generations, is now part of the Coalition military training. I wish you could see how far the smoke from our mountain fires has traveled. With respect and love, your grandson Day." He folded the letter and sent it through the official mail system. It would take 3 months to reach Earth, but his grandfather would appreciate it. The old man would probably laugh and say it was nothing special, just basic survival. But Day knew better. Simple knowledge, properly applied, could change everything. Weeks turned into months. Day's fire-making course became mandatory for all new recruits. But it did not stop there. Soldiers began asking about other primitive skills: how to find water, how to build shelter, how to navigate without computers, how to hunt and forage. The coalition established a new training division, Primitive Survival Skills. Dai was promoted to senior instructor. They brought in other humans who knew survival techniques. Hana joined the teaching staff, specializing in first aid without modern medical equipment. One day, Day received a visitor. It was Quan, the 8-legged Thros who had failed the Frozen Moon trial. He looked different now, more confident, more humble. "Instructor Day," Quan said, "I came to thank you." "Thank me? For what?" "For teaching me that strength has many forms. On my world, we value physical power above all else. My 8 legs, my armor, my size. I thought these made me strong, but they did not help me on the Frozen Moon. Your knowledge did. I have been studying everything I can about survival. I want to be truly strong, not just physically strong." Day smiled. "You are welcome, Quan. I am glad you are learning." "I have also been teaching my people," Quan continued. "I returned to my home world and showed them fire making. At first they laughed. They said it was primitive and weak. But then I showed them how it could work where our technology could not. Now, many Thros are learning these skills. You have changed more than just the coalition. You have changed how we think about strength and survival." After Quan left, Dai stood at the window of his office and looked out at the stars. He thought about his grandfather, sitting by a fire in the mountains of Earth. He thought about all the humans throughout history who had kept this knowledge alive, passing it from generation to generation. They had preserved fire-making through the age of electricity, through the age of fusion power, through the age of space travel. And now that ancient knowledge was spreading across the galaxy, taught to species who had never even imagined such a thing. A message appeared on his screen. It was from Commander Velthar. "Instructor Day, the Coalition Council has made a decision. They are establishing the Archive of Primitive Knowledge. This archive will collect and preserve survival skills from all member species. We do not want to lose these techniques as technology advances. You have been selected to lead this project. Will you accept?" Day read the message twice. Then he typed his response. "I accept, Commander. I am honored." He leaned back in his chair and smiled. His grandfather had taught him to survive in the mountains with nothing but a ferro rod and knowledge. Now, that simple lesson had become something much larger. It had become a galaxy-wide understanding that sometimes the oldest knowledge was the most valuable. That night, Day made a fire. Not because he needed to, but because he wanted to. He sat beside it in the outdoor area of the training facility and watched the flames dance. Other instructors and recruits saw the fire and joined him. They sat in a circle, different species from different worlds, all warmed by the same ancient technology. They talked about their home worlds. They shared stories of survival. They learned from each other, and in the firelight, they were not so different. They were all just beings trying to survive in a vast and often hostile universe. One young recruit, a female with blue skin and large wings, asked, "Instructor, do you think fire will still be important in 1,000 years? Will we still need these skills?" Day looked at the flames. He thought about his grandfather. He thought about all the humans who had sat by fires for 1,000,000 years. Then he answered, "Yes, As long as there are places where technology fails, as long as there are emergencies and disasters and unexpected challenges, we will need basic survival skills. Technology will continue to advance. We will build better ships and better tools, but we should never forget the simple knowledge that kept our ancestors alive. That knowledge is our foundation. It is where we came from, and no matter how far we travel into the stars, we should always remember how to make fire from nothing. The recruits nodded. The fire crackled. And somewhere, across the vast distance of space, an old man in the mountains of Earth smiled, knowing that his grandson had learned the lesson well. Knowledge endures. Fire never dies. And humanity, with their ancient skills and adaptable minds, had found their place among the stars.